Part 1. Something walks whistling past my house every night at 3:03. Every night, no matter the weather, a mysterious figure ambles down our lane, whistling a soft tune. You only catch the sound if you are in the living room or kitchen when it passes, and it always starts at exactly 3:03. The sound begins faintly, somewhere near the start of the lane by the Chandrai bungalow. Our house sits roughly in the middle of the lane, so the whistling drifts past us and fades off in the direction of the dead end. When I was younger, my sister and I would sneak down to the kitchen on some nights just to listen. Ma and Papa never approved, and we'd be in big trouble if they caught us, but they weren't too strict since we always followed one crucial rule. Never try to see who, or what, is whistling. My neighborhood is an odd little world. I've lived here since I was 6, in a cozy colony where the houses are small yet well-kept, with decent yards and plenty of nooks to explore. There are loads of kids around. I turned 13 last October. We grew up together, playing cricket in the narrow lanes or chasing each other between verandas on hot summer afternoons. This was a wonderful place to grow up. But amid all its charm, two peculiar things stood out: the nightly whistling and the unexplainable streak of good fortune. I never minded the whistling much. After all, I couldn't even hear it properly from my bedroom. However, Ma and Papa rarely spoke of it, so I eventually stopped asking questions. Papa is a strong, calm man with a gentle accent that hints at his early childhood in a different part of India. But when the whistler appears, his calm demeanor shatters. His speech quickens, his eyes dart, and he reminds us of the one big rule: never look out when the whistler passes by. Not that we could, even if we wanted to. Every window in our house is fitted with heavy, inner shutters made of thick canvas that pull down from the top and latch securely at the bottom. Each latch even has a tiny lock, about the size you'd expect on a diary. Every night, before we all sleep, Papa locks these shutters and tucks away the key in his room. Well, I'm never entirely sure what she thinks about the whistling. I've caught glimpses of her in the living room at 3:03 when the sound begins. I once peeked just an inch through the door. She's not out there often, but once or twice a month, I suspect she sits on our faded red sofa, quietly listening. The whistler always plays the same tune. It's cheerful. Da-da-da-da-da-dum. Da-da-da-da-da-dum. Remember how I mentioned that apart from the eerie whistle, our colony is blessed with a streak of good luck? It's hard to explain, and Papa doesn't like discussing it much, but it seems that miracles happen here on a daily basis. It could be winning a local radio contest, snagging an unexpected promotion at work, or even finding a rare old coin in your courtyard. The weather is pleasant, crime is almost unheard of, and every garden seems to bloom with extra vibrancy. A million little blessings, Ma often says about living here. Yet, the main reason we settled in this neighborhood was my little sister Neha. She was born very sick. Something was wrong with her lungs. We couldn't even bring her home when she was born. We could only visit her in the hospital. She was so tiny, even smaller than the other babies, and had to rely on a machine to breathe. We moved into our house to be closer to the hospital, and almost immediately, Neha began to improve. The doctors couldn't quite explain it. They chalked it up to the treatments they administered, but we all sensed something else at work. Papa and I knew that Neha's recovery was yet another one of the million little blessings our colony bestowed upon us. That's why we stayed, even after we learned that for every small miracle in our little heaven, something dreadful might occur if someone dared to look for the whistler. Shortly after we moved in, a group known simply as the Welcoming Committee arrived. They showed up bearing a plate of hot samosas, a small basket of sweets, and a neat manila folder. 4 of them visited us, exchanging pleasantries, offering me a Cadbury chocolate bar, and taking turns cradling baby Neha during her first week home from the hospital. Then they asked to speak with Ma and Papa privately. I was sent to my room, yet I strained to catch every word. The committee explained how exceptional our colony was, so extraordinarily nice that it defied explanation. Then they mentioned the even more inexplicable whistling. It began each night at 3:03 and ended at 3:05 precisely. They warned Papa that the whistling was harmless only if you never sought to see its source. They hammered home this point, and I pressed my ear against the door, straining to hear. The committee spoke of people who had dared to look, of how their luck would soar dramatically. A dark cloud would follow them, and whatever misfortune was possible would soon find its way into their lives. In a manila envelope, they had included newspaper clippings, grim reports of car accidents, ruined lives, public tragedies, and freak incidents. Not everyone dies, I heard the head of the committee say, but even those who live lose their inner light, there's never any spark in them again. Ma wasn't entirely convinced. She even accused the committee of trying to scare us out of our new home, questioning whether they were prejudiced because of Papa's accent and his roots from a distant region. Papa, however, calmed her, assuring her that our new neighbors were sincere and that he, having grown up on similar airy tales from his own ma, understood that some things among us were simply different. After the committee left, Papa went to the local hardware store and bought the canvas blinds, the latches, and the locks. That very evening, after dinner, he installed them on every window in the house. Later that night, I crept out of my room at 3 a.m. to find Papa awake on the living room sofa, cradling little Neha. With a finger pressed to his lips in a SHH gesture, he patted the space beside him. I sat down, and we all waited in silence. At exactly 3:03, the whistling began. Da-da-da-da-da-dum. Da-da-da-da-da-dum. It came and went just as our neighbors had promised. Every night since, the whistling returns, and we never look. We continue to cherish our million little blessings, with Neha growing stronger by the day, and Papa even joining the welcoming committee. When a new family moves in, Papa and the committee always greet them with a plate of samosas, a gift basket, and that same manila folder. I can always tell by the look on Papa's face whether the new neighbors have taken the warning seriously or if more mysteries are headed our way. Part 2. Not long after, a new family moved in right next door. Their previous occupant, a kind old lady known as Ms. Marie, who had lived in the big yellow bungalow for 105 years, had passed away. The newcomers seemed to settle in perfectly. They accepted the welcoming committee's rituals and even followed Papa's strict instructions about locking the shutters, especially since they had a young child of their own. One evening, when the new neighbors had to leave town unexpectedly, they sent their son, Harsh, a 12-year-old a year younger than me, to stay with us. I hadn't known him well before that night, but as soon as his parents dropped him off after dinner, I sensed something was off. Do you know who's always out there whistling every night? Harsh asked as soon as the adults had left the room. We were all sitting in the den, with an old Bollywood movie playing quietly on the television. My sister and I exchanged a wary glance. We don't talk about that, I replied. I think it's that weirdo who lives in the big yellow bungalow on the corner, Harsh said casually. Mr. Tiwari? Neha piped up. No way, he's really nice. Harsh shrugged. Must be some psycho then. Neha stiffened. We don't talk about it, I repeated firmly. Let's go to my room and play some video games. For the next few hours, we played on my console, munched on namkeen and popcorn, and watched movies, a typical sleepover. But I could see Harsh growing more restless as the night stretched on. After Ma and Papa wished us a good night, locked the shutters, and retired to bed, Harsh rose from his beanbag and crept over to where Neha and I were still sitting on my bed. Have you ever even tried looking? He whispered. It's nearly time. I was shocked to see that he was right. It was almost 3 a.m. I sighed. We don't. See, I can't even try to look because Papa locks the shutters every night and hides the key, he continued, not letting me finish. So does our Papa? Neha interjected. No, Harsh replied with a grin. Your Papa locks the shutters, yes, but he doesn't hide the key. He keeps it on his regular keychain. So? I asked, a sinking feeling in my stomach because I already knew what he would say next. I had noticed, too, that Papa hadn't been tucking the key away as he used to. Clearly, he trusted that we would all take the rule seriously. Harsh's smile widened. After Papa locked up but before Ma and Papa went to bed, I went to the washroom. And on my way, I may have peeked into their room, and I might have seen Papa's keychain on his bedside table. So, I borrowed the key to the shutters. Neha and I stared in disbelief, and his grin only grew more mischievous. "You're lying," I said. Harsh shrugged. "You can check if you want. Just crack open your parents' door a little and see for yourself." "Stay here," I ordered, addressing both of them. "Don't move a muscle." I hurried over to the door of Ma and Papa's room and paused. If Harsh wasn't lying, Papa would be furious, beyond furious. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. I eased the door open just an inch to peek into the darkness beyond. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. Just a couple of steps into the room, I froze. The whistling began, and I could hear it clearly, right from within my parents' room. I never realized that they, too, must have been listening to the sound night after night since we moved in. I wasn't sure I could have slept through that eerie tune. I stood there, listening as the whistling crept closer, uncertain whether to switch on the light or call out for Papa. Soft sounds from the living room pulled me back to reality. "Neha!" I yelled, bolting out of the room. I found Harsh and Neha standing by the front door next to a window. Harsh wasn't lying. I could see him fumbling with the latch on one of the shutters. I heard a quiet click. He did have the key. Harsh chuckled softly as Neha stood beside him, tense and frightened yet undeniably curious. The whistling now hovered just outside our house. I must have made a sound, because I suddenly felt compelled to move. I'm not exactly fleet-footed, but somehow I reached Neha in a moment. My eyes remained fixed on her as I heard Harsh pull the shutter all the way down, triggering the mechanism that allowed it to rise slowly. I heard the snap as it began to move, and then the whistling sounded from right outside the window. I wrapped my arms around Neha, turning us so that she faced away from the window. At the same time, I squeezed my eyes shut. The shutter whipped open, and in that heartbeat, the whistling ceased. I felt Neha trembling in my arms. "Don't look, okay?" I whispered urgently. "Don't turn around." We positioned ourselves with her back to the hallway and me facing the window, but my eyes remained shut. Neha nodded against my shoulder, as if understanding that some mysteries were better left unseen. Part 3. I reached out with the arm that wasn't holding Neha and tried to steady Harsh by touching his arm. He was shaking even more than Neha. "Harsh?" I asked softly. He didn't answer. His eyes were wide with terror. I edged closer in the dark, my hand searching along the window's cool glass for the string of the shutter. The glass was unnaturally cold for this time of year. As I moved my hand upward, the glass gradually warmed, and I felt a gentle hum vibrate into my fingertips. I forced myself not to think of what might lie beyond that window. Finally, I found the string and yanked the shutter shut. I opened my eyes. In the dim glow leaking from the adjacent room, I could make out Harsh's pale face, staring fixedly at the now closed window. "Harsh?" I asked again, my voice trembling. He turned toward me and screamed, a blood-curdling sound that filled the room. In an instant, chaos erupted. Lights flicked on in the hallway, then in the living room. I heard the heavy thud of Ma and Papa's footsteps echoing on the floor. I dared not glance back at Harsh. My eyes remained locked on him. He looked even more haggard now, pale as chalk, with his lip bitten raw so that a thin red line of blood trailed down his chin, and he had even wet his pants. "What happened?" Papa demanded from behind me. I managed to turn and face him. He looked out the window. I'd never seen Papa frightened before, but that night, an ancient terror seemed to warp his face, the unmistakable dread of a parent. "Just Harsh," he mouthed, relief mingling with a grim resolve. I nodded. Papa exhaled deeply, a momentary relief washing over him, until his gaze fell on Harsh, and his expression darkened. I wondered if Papa's brief relief was tinged with regret that perhaps he was glad Harsh had been the only one to break the rule. Then came a knock at the door. We all froze. Harsh whimpered. Don't answer it, Ma instructed calmly. She stood at the threshold of the hall, and though I'd always thought of her as a skeptic, more amused than scared by Papa's stories about the shutters and the whistler, that night, even she looked like a believer. I noticed both Ma and Papa clutched sturdy cricket bats they had taken from their bedroom. The knocking resumed, louder this time. Please don't open the door, Harsh whispered. Papa walked over to him and drew him close in a hug. We won't, he assured softly, still holding his bat firmly. Nothing's coming in tonight. Then came a series of heavy, deliberate thuds. This time, the knocking rattled the door. Harsh screamed again, and Neha clutched my neck, frightened. Ma knelt down beside us, wrapping Neha and me in a tight embrace. The thuds grew insistent, first at the front door, then suddenly from the back door. In a terrifying exchange, the knocking bounced from front to back, alternating between loud, heavy blows and soft, persistent taps. Soon, there were rapping sounds on every window and even on the walls. It felt as though our entire house had become a giant drum, with unseen hands beating on it relentlessly. It was as if we were trapped in a shell that something was trying to break through. Stop! Harsh yelled. The knocking finally died down. I won't tell, he managed between sobs, staring fixedly at the door. I promise I won't tell anyone what I saw. Just please, go away. We waited, tense and silent, for nearly a minute. Then a soft, rhythmic tap-tap-tap began at the window Harsh had peered through earlier. Harsh burst into tears, crying like someone condemned and powerless, while Papa held him, brushing back his hair without offering any empty reassurances. The persistent tapping continued for the rest of the night. We huddled together in the living room for what felt like hours. Ma eventually tried to shepherd us back to my room, but the moment we stepped away, the knocking resumed at the front door, so loud it seemed as if the door might give way at any moment. Fear gripped me, not just for the integrity of the door, but for what might be waiting on the other side. Eventually, we returned to the living room, and miraculously the violent knocking ceased. Only the soft tap-tap-tap on the window persisted. None of us slept that night. The tapping stopped around 7 a.m., around the time the first light of day creeps over our colony. We waited another couple of hours before Papa finally went to open the shutters on one of the windows. But he made sure we all gathered in his room first. I heard him open the door, step out for a moment, then return with a measured nod. Okay, he said quietly. It's done. Later that day, Harsh's parents arrived to pick him up. Ma and Papa escorted him to his home, and for several hours, we didn't see or hear from him. Neha and I watched from our window as we saw his family hastily packing up, a moving truck arriving in their driveway by late afternoon. What has stayed with me is the haunted look in Harsh's eyes, the pallor on his face, and the hollow, lightless expression that seemed to afflict him and his parents. By sunset, Harsh and his family were gone. I still remember the words of the welcoming committee when they first warned Papa. Not everyone who dares to look at the whistler meets a tragic end, but even those who survive are left with a darkness that dims the spark within them. A million little tragedies can befall a life. Sometimes I wonder about Neha. If I had been slower that night, if she had peered out of the window, would I have been compelled to look too? Would I have shared that dreadful burden? I'm grateful I never had to find out. We still live in that house, in our little colony. Every night, the mysterious whistler continues his silent passage along the lane, and our blessings and our curses remain intertwined. We're more cautious now. We rarely invite friends over for sleepovers, and Papa has grown ever more meticulous about hiding the key to the shutters. Some things, after all, are better left unseen.